Welcome to the woods. Blue skies behind me. But anyone who follows me over on Telegram, and if you don't, pop over there. Look me up. Anyone who follows me over there will know that last night in the UK we were hit by a bit of a storm, a bit windy. Storm Dudley, of all names. And this morning I had to pull a polytunnel out of the branches of a tree, and that ended up upside down in a very sorry state, and it was twisted and in some very strange angles, and the cover looked a little forlorn. But to all intents and purposes, I still had a polytunnel. There it was. And that kind of got me thinking that sad polytunnel was a lot like our political system, our social system. Insofar as all the components are there. Chickens have come down to say hello. I still had all the parts, I still had all the bars, I still had all the connections, all the screws, the nuts, the bolts, the cover. But in the state it was in this morning, it was not fit for purpose. It was no longer of any use. And that's much like the system we're in today. All the components are there. We have the institutions. We have the diagram of how it all should all go together and what it should do. But it doesn't work the way it is. The system we're surviving under is upside down, and everything's bent at the wrong angle. I recently watched the Canadian Prime Minister expand his power into areas never seen before. Never seen before under Western democracy. He's now given himself the power and the right to freeze bank accounts and to take money from people who disagree with him. And that's right down the end of the road of a broken system. For many years I've noticed that the system is falling to bits. That what they call democracy stopped working years ago. That there was no real option to vote for one party or the other when they were both heading down the road to something I didn't want to be a part of. So where was my choice? And that led me to smaller political organisations and parties that offered differing routes, differing ways forward. But after years going down that avenue, I became despondent with these smaller parties when it became apparent that the system would never relinquish power to them. And I saw other parties emerge that the system allowed to grow, that it allowed to flourish, in order that the people's frustration could be channeled into dead ends, with no hope of these people ever gaining power. So if you take away someone's ability to choose the party or the system which they wish to live under, you're going to be faced with protests. You're going to be faced with the people telling you what they want. And that, up until very recently, has been allowed. And there have been successes with grassroots protests. Over here in the UK, the poll tax protests that happened in the 1990s led to the government backing down and changing their policies because they were so unpopular. So protesting can work. But the system's decided that that's no longer viable, that the only protest that should be allowed is the ones they agree with. And anything that goes against what they want or their narrative will from now on be classed as some form of terrorism. And the protesters will be treated thus, as terrorists. In fact, the laws put in place now in Canada are an expansion of the anti-terrorism legislation they already had. So no longer are you going to be allowed to protest, to say that I don't like this, that I want something different. So if you take away a man's choice with politics, and then take away his ability to protest, and go further and even take away his ability to support somebody else who's protesting, what other options are you leaving him? This seems to me a very dangerous way to treat people and populations. It's unlikely that once these laws and rules are put in place that they're going to be repealed. I've spoken before about the gates at the entrance of Downing Street, where our Prime Minister lives. Now, these huge gates and railings were put up at the height of the IRA bombing campaign in order that no one could get to Downing Street unless allowed. Now, that threat has long since passed, but those gates and railings are still there decades later. And the creeping laws we see coming into practice now won't be rolled back. We saw this with the Patriot Act in in America, the stringent rules and regulations on hopping on a plane to fly from one state to another have never been repealed, and in some cases have been tightened up. The new online, I can't remember the name of the bill, Online Harms Act, bill, law, is again another sign, another step towards a totalitarian global government, where not only are illegal practices punished, but anything that those in power see as opposing them. And the phraseology in there was legal but harmful. No clarification on what harmful is. Harmful to who? I doubt it will be harmful to me and you, but harmful to those in power, maybe, and therefore not allowed. We've had the police in the United Kingdom, and I've seen it happening in other countries as well, going round to people's houses telling them to check their thinking. We've had police knocking on doors, talking to people about their Facebook posts and their tweets. And we've talked over the last 2 years about where we can see all this going and ending up in a Chinese style social credit system. And a lot of people found that hard to believe, but it's here. Those rules brought into place in Canada this week is a social credit system. In essence, what Trudeau said was, if you go against what the government is saying and what we want to do, we will freeze your bank account and take your money. And anybody that tries to assist you, exactly the same will happen to them. No dissent. And it leaves me wondering, what path do they want us to take? If they shut off politics and they shut off protest, what other path is left? Traditionally, that would have been an uprising to overthrow tyranny. And maybe that's what they want. For me, personally, I think the time has come to seriously look at a separation. Not to fight these people, to point out where you can how wrong they are, but to start now building something worthwhile. Because I can't see how we can continue to suffer under their yoke. We deserve more. And if we can't get it from them, we should start to build it ourselves. And I'm not being flippant. The build it yourself meme actually wasn't a joke and has started to happen. And there is things we can do. There's already organisations with networks set up. We can look at businesses and providing for our own. We can look at systems we want in place that could be expanded into the future. But we need to start talking about it and doing it today, before that boot hill comes down even harder. And I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because I've seen what one man can do, what one person can do. All I did was decide that I didn't want to be a part of what they had. That's one person. If 10 do it, you've got a community. And there's strength in numbers. If 100 do it, people will see. And then they'll want to do it. And it will spread. So start thinking about the way to move forward and how we can achieve it. Much like today, even after a pretty rough night, it's nice and bright, like the future. And that polytunnel took me an hour's graft to put back in place the bits that were bent out of shape, put it up the right way, and now it's good. It's fit for purpose. I'll speak to you later, people. I've still got a bit more to do round here. All the stuff that's going on at the moment is all negative. But we don't need to let that affect us. Point out where they're going wrong and start looking to what we can do to make things better for ourselves. You're in control of you. Onwards and upwards. Speak to you soon.